Hello again, my dear viewers. April 2 is still going on in our yard. And the traditional evening report from the fronts, what is happening on the fronts of the Ukrainian war. Well, in principle, the Kiev and Chernihiv Sumy direction as a whole, I described this morning. We will not return to this direction yet, there is no news there yet. And we immediately go to the main direction. This is Donbass. What we have going on here. According to another survey of my viewers who live in the combat zone, very serious artillery strikes are being carried out today on the city of Barvenkovo. That is, Russian artillery, Russian aviation strikes. The processing of the positions of the armed forces of Ukraine is in full swing. It is clear that there will be big fights here very soon. Because Barvenkovo is a fundamental point that cannot be given to the armed forces of Ukraine in any way. Why is Barvenkovo so important? Because if we take Barvenkovo, then very good prospects open up for the Russian army to quickly cover the Slavic Kramatorsk group. If the armed forces of Ukraine hold Barvenkovo, then they will have to attack on a rather narrow front, all the while expecting a blow to the flank. In the Slavic direction, relatively calm. No serious attacks have been made here yet. In the area of Gorlovka, the troops of the Donetsk People's Republic marched there next to 1 kilometer and gradually cover Avdiivka from the north. Russian artillery continues to work, the defense is gnawed through. But not as fast as some would like. Meanwhile, very serious battles are taking place in the area of Velikaya Novoselka. Very fierce battles. Russian troops are bypassing this settlement from the north, trying to take it surrounded and go to the Donetsk-Zaporozhye highway. And further to the Volchek River, which is a rather significant water barrier. As I understand it, very fierce battles will be fought over this line. But the main forces of those troops that stormed Mariupol will soon join this grouping. In general, the operation to capture Mariupol is almost over. The armed forces of Ukraine are concentrated in 3 pockets of resistance at the plant named after Ilyich, Azovstal and the seaside area. And some of the troops that took part in the storming of the city are already preparing to be sent to the north. After a short respite, they will continue to surround the already Donbass grouping of the armed forces of Ukraine in order to take it into pincers. And here I want to note one more important feature of today. Today, for the first time, Russian aviation has begun to seriously work on the railway communications of the armed forces of Ukraine in a normal way. She managed to hit one of the echelons that transported equipment to the battle zone in the Donbass. I was often asked why the Russian troops do not attack the Ukrainian echelons. Why don't Ukrainian columns attack those reinforcements that are now going to Donbass? You know, I want to take this opportunity to answer this question here. In fact, the Ukrainian armed forces rarely use such a thing as moving in columns. They move in such totish jumps for several tens of kilometers from one settlement and further to the next, and then the next and the next. Accordingly, with such tactics, it is quite difficult to direct aircraft at them. And now, in connection with the massive transfer of equipment, they have returned to the tactics of transferring with the help of echelons. And literally immediately got hit. And Russian aviation also inflicted several strikes at once on fuel depots in the Khmelnytsky region, in the Odessa region. And most importantly, the Kremenchug oil refinery was finally struck. This is the only oil refinery in Ukraine that supplies fuel. Also, strikes were made on the railway stations of Sinelnikova and Lozovaya. That is, it is obvious that Russian aviation is gradually cutting off the communications of the Ukrainian group on the left bank, depriving it of the remnants of fuel and lubricants, and trying to inflict losses on it with airstrikes. I understand that as the intensity of the battle for Donbass grows, Russian airstrikes will become stronger and stronger. We stated a few days ago that the big battle for Donbass has already begun. And every new day increases its bitterness. And this will be the most important battle of this war. In which, judging by what I now see from the movement of troops, a large part of the forces of all sides should take part. That is, more than half of all the troops that are used today in Ukraine by the armed forces of Ukraine, as well as the armed forces of the Russian Federation, should take part in this battle. This is what is happening on the main front of Donbass. Well, briefly, what is happening in the Kherson region? According to the information that I have, Russian troops repulsed the attacks that came from Kryvyi Rog. And in general, today the Nikolaev garrison is preparing to repel the offensive of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. Which, according to British intelligence, should begin in the very next few days. And the main goal of which, according to British intelligence officers, should be the capture of Nikolaev and possibly much more global goals. Here, as they say, no comment. I'm just passing on the data released by British intelligence. That's about what I can say about what is happening on the line of contact. Naturally, I continue to observe the events and tomorrow expect the next review from the frontline. Goodbye.